There we go. Okay, so welcome everyone, whoever you might be out there in virtual land. This is Michael Naylor, and I'm having the opportunity to interview a beloved and renowned Type 9 Billy, who resides in the same state as I, maybe even 8 miles away, or 5. And I'm the director of the of Enneagram Maine. You can find me at www.enneagrammaine.com. And so we're just going to just sort of open this up and have some fun with it. So just really appreciate, Billy, you being here, and I would love to hear about your tale as a Type 9, and the agony and the ecstasy and everything in between, and maybe even just starting when you discovered it, that you were a Type 9.
Well, Michael, thank you, first of all, for including me in this interview. And I would say my journey as a Type 9 peacemaker probably started about 10 years ago, at least my knowledge. I slowly came into knowing more about the Enneagram. One of our other coaches actually shared that the Enneagram had been around forever. And I became curious once I knew that there were 9 types, and supposedly none were better or worse than each other. I remember doing the survey and finding out that I was strongly a Type 9 peacemaker, which, as I read more about the peacemaker, I thought was absolutely spot on. There was almost nothing about the description of the Type 9 that I felt was, not about my personality. And then I learned, I also learned a little bit about the wing, concept of the wing, and realized I also had a very strong wing in the area of Type 1. I'll get into that a little bit later, but some of the characteristics that I really resonated with right from the beginning was the knowledge that my whole life I've been very conflict avoidant, would do almost anything not to have to directly confront situations. And in my previous careers, I realized that is not always possible, and there would be a lot of internal turmoil in having to face difficult situations. And I learned how to do it, but I don't think I ever felt really comfortable with that. I'll be open and vulnerable in the sense that I think maybe I've also probably suffered a bit from the imposter syndrome. And I'll explain that in that many times, when people would give me a compliment, it certainly felt very nice, but there was this feeling of like, but if they really knew me, they probably wouldn't tell me that. And on the opposite side of the spectrum, my level of sensitivity is very, very high. So any kind of criticism would be most cutting to me. I love thinking about the Type 9 as seeking harmony and centeredness, and not having events in my life that create waves. So that's a full-time job, because as waves are created, and then that wing kicks in with some of the control, and there's like a tug of war. Some of the other things that I believe about the type 9 that really do resonate with me is there's a tendency to be a people pleaser, to go with the flow rather than to confidently state that maybe I'm not all right with something. I have a partner that loves to entertain and has a big family. And sometimes over the years, when I'd learned there was going to be yet another caravan of family members coming, I was like, my center was just thrown off. But rather than say, hey, this is really, really getting me out of my comfort zone, I would just start cooking and cleaning and being the perfect host, all of that. But with some resentment, I wasn't fully invested in it, and it took me a while to be more transparent and state my truth.
Yeah. Well, let me interject a couple things you've said. So other 9s I've spoken to in reference to the imposter syndrome, it was as if when people would give them a compliment, they had like kind of an inner critic that would say, "Oh no, you're nothing special. That's
Yeah.
they're overdoing it. It's not that good, or whatever it is you're really good at. 9s often say, often I don't see it. I'm just sort of doing what I do, and people give me a compliment, and I don't sense it. I can see what's great in you, but it's almost like I become invisible to myself. So maybe that voice of, if you really knew who I was, you wouldn't think so greatly of me, is another sort of a cousin of you're nobody special, or you're no one to be made a big deal over, and that this ability to, in a sense, kind of embrace one's capacities, which in the Enneagram world you could say moving towards point 3 is sometimes a growth trajectory for 9s, in terms of just noticing it's okay to shine, to be seen, and because sometimes 9s will say that they've learned to kind of how to sort of veil themselves, to wear an invisibility cloak when necessary, like talk to the hand, I'm fine. And I've had people say, yeah, when as a little kid, I learned how to be invisible in front of folks, so I didn't have conflict. So I wondered if any of those themes resonate for you.
No, it's so totally, Michael. Absolutely. That feeling of like I'm nobody special. I believe that's been with me since I've been a little boy. Because I still remember, even in school, sometimes getting compliments, things like that, and feeling like that doesn't seem that special to me, or realizing, when people will point out my gifts, there'll be this feeling like, well, doesn't everybody have that? And yet I know they don't. I work with many people that are very direct, or sometimes a bit insensitive. And I realized that just isn't me. And you bring up a good point, because sometimes another thing that I know about myself is when I'm not experiencing harmony, and when the boat has been rocked, what happens is, my reaction is I tend to shut down. I don't physically disappear, but I've had close friends say to me, Billy, where did you just go? Where did you just go? Um, share with me, because you just disappeared for a while there. And that's what I tend to do. I tend to do it if there's too much stimulation. Or, I know that I've always had a tendency more toward introversion, and my batteries really do get recharged many times when I'm alone. And if I don't have that opportunity or take that opportunity, I can experience an awful lot of anxiety. And I've become familiar with a way out of that, to look at some of the strongest characteristics of the type 3 achiever. And let me tell you, that takes some discipline, because I don't feel like I'm all wired like a very healthy type 3 at those times when I've contracted. So to really embrace some of those, and to realize, okay, I need to take charge. Part of the shutting down is I can tend to procrastinate, because I'm looking for the perfect moment to tackle something. And it's very, very easy. My inner critic will say, no, Billy, not today. Tomorrow will be a better day to do that. So I don't think I'm lazy, but I could actually see where some might think I am a little bit. And the other thing too is, I don't know if I'm using the right word when I say disintegration, but if I'm really shut down, I know that I can go to some of those aspects of the type 6 loyal skeptic as well. So I've got these choices. It's like, well, now do I want to expand myself a bit, or do I allow myself to keep contracting? So there's a tug of war within myself that goes on. But in my last career, I was a director of special education in a school district for years. And this imposter syndrome, when I was offered the job and accepted it, my inner critic said to me, it's probably just going to be a matter of time before they find their mistake. If there's a silver lining, to all of this, I think with the type 9 peacemaker is, I know I would be horribly upset if I lost a job or was fired. So I think I overcompensate to make sure that that never happens to me. And it never did happen to me. But it can be a lot of work, because I'm always scanning for potential danger, or what might rock my boat. And realizing, Michael, you may erase this interview because I may be coming across in too much of an unhealthy 9 way. But
well, we're going to cover the whole spectrum. Don't worry.
But yeah, and the thing was, I really believe now, and looking back at the years of that career, that possibly my type 9 peacemaker really assisted me very, very well in the job that I had to do, because I was working with a lot of teachers, a lot of mothers of special needs children. And I think probably what I can say is, at least my brand of type 9 caused me to be a good listener. I don't have a big ego, but I was never tripping over myself to impress. others. And I think that that might be a characteristic that goes along with the type 9. So
Mm.
many times the mothers of special needs children would say to me, Billy, you really create safe space. I feel like I can be open and vulnerable with you, that I don't have to be guarded.
Mm.
I feel like your compassion is very much coming through with helping to program for my child.
Well, I think that's really a powerful attribute and capacity that I've experienced in nines is that just in their energetic, instinctive energy, it's like they emit a force that says you can all relax and settle and be as you are here. There's space for you. This sense of there's space, and it's like a welcoming committee. Like you're welcome here as you are, and it's I've seen that. You know, I had a type 9 counselor that worked with me in the addiction field, and he would walk into a group of 10 men who were all deeply wounded on many levels. And he just had the ability, just by his presence, to create a field of acceptance for who they were, just as they were. And just that beautiful quality of listening and just like, tell me about yourself. That alone was a healing energy for many of them. And it reminds me of Fred Rogers on, you know,
Oh,
uh,
yes.
I mean, he's just like a conduit of kindness and safety and compassion. And I think so that's like to me is the gift of some of the beautiful gifts of the nine, because we often say that nines are so sensitive that they have this ability to kind of sense into the space of other people around them. And because they're so aware of how conflict shakes them up, they're become really intuitively skillful at calming people down and saying the right thing that allow them to relax because they don't want to cause suffering. So so it's an interesting paradox that I can be really, hypersensitive to conflict, but then I become somebody who's gifted at helping people relax and settle down. So, there's a growth edge and a usage of all of that. So, is that you relate to those themes?
Oh, I do, Michael, very much so. For the last 10 years prior to the pandemic, every Tuesday, I volunteered at the women's prison in New Hampshire
Hmm.
and worked with groups of women that were incarcerated. And I would hear just unbelievable tales of their upbringing and their lives
Hmm.
and their guilt and shame for whatever reason caused them to be incarcerated, and was always able to make it clear that the purpose of the group was never to judge, but to move on, to move on and not judge, not judge, and to try to create safe space so that they'd be able to look at things maybe from a different perspective. Um, but always within me was, I think, that sensitivity first. I thank God that I was never arrested or incarcerated, because I couldn't imagine surviving that experience.
Hmm.
But I think the other was feeling, allowing myself to feel the pain that so many of the women described.
Hmm.
And maybe even to realize that there was a very important experience and learning that was going on for them, as painful as it was. That maybe they were enrolled in some kind of spiritual degree almost, where
Uh-huh.
the experiences that they were having were necessary, although painful.
Hmm.
Um, and and I felt such respect for what they were going through. And once I'm able to return to the prison, I will absolutely do that, because it's been one of the most powerful experiences that I've had. But many times it did feel gratifying when the women would say to me, I've never told anybody this before, but it
Hmm.
feels right to be able to tell you.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I felt deeply honored that they would trust me with
Yeah.
that. And at those moments, I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt just gratitude for
Hmm.
being part of their journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, so it's again another sort of paradox I have noticed. Nines have this sort of innate capacity to see the silver lining in things, or to see the bright side, or the good of things, and to see the innate good in people. A lot of nines I've worked with just are able to zero in on, the gifts, the beauty, the magnificence of the soul of a person, and just kind of really have an easy attention that goes there. And so they can be bright lights, these beautiful bright lights during difficult times. Again, I think of Fred Rogers and the way that he, was able to really bring in the ideal of kind of unconditional compassion towards children, and
Yeah,
modeled it and mirrored it, and then the sort of shadow side is that gift can also be used if I'm scared and I want to be, keep people away from me, as I can compliment them and act like everything's fine when in fact I'm nervous Nelly and I'm shaking and baking. But I think that we often talk about the negative, yeah, and forget that there's this really beautiful gift. A lot of nines are beautiful encouragers of the beauty and capacity of other people, and the imbalance can be is that they forget to shine that light on themselves and to remember to do it for themselves too. So I wondered how that's been for you.
well, again, I sometimes feel like the description of the type 9 was written about me.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Michael, I guess going back to conflict avoidance and
Mhm.
um, needing harmony, I think I've perfected the art of making it difficult for people to want to fight with me. I typically don't trigger people, if if at all possible. Surprisingly, though, because what I realized from the time I was a child, um, I grew up in an environment, well, actually in an environment that um, didn't really allow for disagreement. I mean, there was a dictatorship going on in my family, um, and absolutely the way I was wired, but it was never encouraged to show anger. So when I got to adulthood, I had very, very little experience with the expression of anger. And I remember some of the first times where something really triggered me, and I expressed anger. And I can remember I, I had these two feelings. One, one was I was afraid of it because I didn't understand it. But the other is it felt really good.
Oh.
Because I felt like I'm showing up
Mhm.
and I'm expressing how I'm truly feeling. And this is a situation where it really isn't appropriate to just be agreeable, but it takes a lot to get me there.
Mhm. And well, one of the things that some nines have said is when, again, it's like an inner critic voice. Like if I start to experience anger or intensity, but anger specifically, the message I get is I will be exiled from the planet. If everything I love or care about, I will be, like spit out in a space module, like 2001, where how the computer, spewed Dave out into the cosmos, never to return. But there's a sense of I'll just get cut off, so that when they begin to start to express anger, they go up against this kind of scary message. And so, what has been your experience as you sort of move through the fear patterns and around expressing anger or your point of view?
It's so tied into this natural inclination of people pleasing.
Mhm.
So when you really look at expressing anger, it's so opposite from people pleasing. So there's very much the fear within me that I'll be abandoned and that I won't be forgiven for that expression of,
Mm.
of discontent or anger. Um, and I can feel the anxiety churn prior to me being more transparent about what I'm really feeling, or if I'm starting to feel resentment because I feel like maybe I've been taken advantage of, that kind of thing. There's this feeling like if I express it, they're certainly going to look at me differently. They're not going to see me as a nice person.
As a nice person, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And sometimes now when I look back over the years, I wonder if it was always necessary to be such a nice person. It's like, maybe that's my growing edge, to be able to be one of the hardest things for me to ever do was to have a conversation with a person and actually say, no, I really disagree with your point of view.
Mhm.
I'd always couch it in something more palatable, like, that's interesting. And I also can see it this way. It's it's all, almost presented on a pretty pillowcase rather than, like,
Hmm.
no, that sure doesn't resonate with me at all. I just don't, I don't, I don't say that. When I've had people say, you don't have to be so polite, and
Yeah.
I'm like, because I've worked with I've worked with a good number of type 8 challengers and even type 3 achievers, um, who have said to me, just, don't put lipstick on this. If you hear me say something, call me out on it. And, I've learned professionally, I mean, I still think I do it diplomatically, but I've seen people call each other out, and I could just never do that. That would be so uncharacteristic. Sometimes I'm a little jealous of people that can do it with such ease.
Well, those eights don't hold back, do they?
My
Uh,
goodness, I know.
just go boom.
No, I've worked with type 8s and they've described themselves as pit bulls. I've worked with other aides that are lovely, and I
Yeah,
think they've done a lot of work on themselves and they're
yeah,
diplomatic, but they're not afraid of telling their truth either.
yeah, yeah. It doesn't seem to be a part of their menu. about fear of telling the truth. So it's, yeah, just we're so wired differently. But I love that expression about putting lipstick on it, or delivering on a pillow. And there's a time and place for that. There's
Yeah,
a time and place where delivering it with a pillow actually wakes somebody up. And there's another time when it just puts them back to sleep. So the skill, it's the same way with the pit bull. There's times when being the pit bull wakes everybody up, and other times it scares the crap out of them and they run for the high hills, right? So
yes,
how do I, as a conscious person, learn to notice when something is really working, and when is it something that I'm doing that's habitually keeping everything asleep? And eights can do that by being
yeah,
grumpy and aggressive all the time, and everybody numbs out and runs. So it's an interesting challenge, I think, for nines, for instance, is that there's a powerful time and place for that gentleness. Like in working with the men I worked with at Serenity House, that gentleness just broke their hearts open. They were
yeah,
used to being battered all the time, and they would just tell you to F off and I'm going to kick your ass and what else you got for me, right? But then gentleness slips in through the back door and they're like crying and opening up. So it's just, I just think it's a matter of what works in the moment. So for all the types, that becomes a challenge of when is my gift now a detriment, and not working for me. So when you think about, one of the things I've noticed about nines, and you alluded to this a little bit, is this idea. I remember I was when I was working as an addictions counselor at Serenity House, and I had these nine guys surrounding me, and after about a week and a half, I noticed that one guy, I never called on him. It's like he blended into the couch.
yeah,
And I said, Devin, how do you do that? Uh, I just like look past you. It's like you're a Jedi who says to me, "Counselor, all is well. Look away, look away." And he says, "Well, I perfected that when I was a little kid in grade school. I could just put a cloak over me, and if I didn't want to be called on, nobody did." And he was a Type 9. He had that invisibility cloak. So it sounds like have like how do you notice that? It sounds like your friends notice it. Like, Billy, where'd you go? What do we say about the nines? They're the one type that can leave the room without leaving the room, because they just disappear. So what has been, say a little bit more about your relationship to that quality of invisibility, or disappearing, or as a survival or as a habit?
oh, yeah. So interestingly, even in elementary school, as young as I was at that point, there's it, it's almost like something to perfect, the perfect way to disappear. So a smile, a smile, and periodically just a nod of agreement,
Mm.
which would show there's nothing going on with Billy. And I would just be out there. I'd be like, you know what? I'm just zoned out, but I don't look spaced out. I look like I'm engaged, but I'm not. Um,
Yeah.
not at all.
Uh-huh.
And a few people that really got to know me that were astute would call me out on it. And they'd say, "So Billy, what do you think about that?" Now sometimes it would be like, think about what? You know, why? What am I thinking about? Because I was like so out there. Um, but I think within me also is this feeling like, as long as I look agreeable, nobody's gonna really hone in on me, you know.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but with people that I feel very, very comfortable with, and I mean, I have to know that they would never abandon me.
Mhm.
then I can make a face. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I can make a face or squint
Hmm.
or make a frown,
Yeah.
that always gets attention. They'll be like, oh, Billy, so what's going on with you? So,
Hmm.
you know, I know I've got it within me to draw attention to myself, but
Yeah.
usually it has to be for a good reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of soothing behaviors and rituals. I'm probably going down another 9 rabbit hole, but the thing is, there there are there's almost like prerequisites to peacemaking. So for instance, Michael, I really do love to cook and I do love to take care of people.
Hmm.
as as long as they're invited. you know um, but but things have to be a certain way. Like, I really believe when I'm cooking food that I have to be in the right frame of mind because I want to infuse it with some love. And in order to do that, I have to light a few candles in the kitchen. I I tend to always, ever since I've been a kid, gravitate to more soothing music rather than hard rock or rock and roll, that kind of thing. Even my system seems to dictate um, what I need.
Hmm.
So I'll be in the kitchen with my candles and my soothing music.
Hmm.
And a lot of times people will come in and they'll say, what can I help you with? And I just really want to be alone. you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my tendency will usually be like, oh my goodness, I'm doing fine. What can I get for you? And then they'll go
Hmm.
back into the living room, and I think they pick up on the fact that I'm in my little ritual,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. You're kind of, it sort of points to that conversation we have about the 9 developing an inner sanctum where in their
yeah.
imagination world it's peaceful and calm, and they can go there under stress and remember things that really soothe them. And then it sounds like in the kitchen you kind of have you create that peaceful space, and hopefully no one will intrude, and you
Yeah.
have that Jedi capacity to say, I'm fine, go away, go in the other room.
That's it. That is so true. Um, and then, once dinner is ready, then I'm ready to connect and interact.
Yeah.
But I think there's such a relationship between, for me, peacemaking and sanctuary. I
Mhm.
really, the spaces that I'm that in my living situations usually are very harmonious. I'm not
Mm.
into splashy colors. I like earth tones. It's I gravitate toward soothing,
Yeah.
soothing colors and musics and scents.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. So you're really that attunement. So that's really, I think, powerful. Is this? It's like creating the ambiance internally and externally, and having again, it's like a climate. 9s are very aware of their internal emotional climate. It's not too stormy. It's not too. It's like there's this place that's just luxurious and nice, and it's kind of like I think of the hobbits. That they were very 9ish, creating these down to earth, comfortable spaces, uh, and then I don't want anybody to intrude on that. And you're not welcome to come in and create a storm here. So sometimes 9s have, like you say, a ritual for what calms me down, a way I go about my day, a way of how I arrange things, and so it sounds like you just feel that both in your visual world, creating it, and also internally. So what has helped you in terms of becoming more relaxed and developing a sort of inner quiet? Has meditation been anything you've done, or
Yeah, I I started transcendental meditation in 1972,
mm,
and I still practice it. Um, when I'm out of sync with myself,
mhm,
I've come to realize I can usually figure out what needs to be adjusted. You know, some sometimes I look at it almost like the pillars of a structure, where one pillar might be my financial well-being,
mhm,
another is health and exercise, another is friends and family, another is my partner. And usually when I'm out of sync, I'm worried about one of those pillars.
mm,
And I'll come back to what it is. Sometimes I'll allow myself to get too isolated,
mhm,
where in the pursuit of recharging my battery, and harmony, I, especially during the pandemic, not including many people into my repertoire because it wasn't safe.
mm,
And then realizing it's like I'm a bit, I'm too isolated here. um, other other times, if I'm feeling anxious, I'll really take a look at, like, how am I doing with diet and exercise? It's like I I typically don't eat a lot of fast food or things like that. But every once in a while, there'll be a couple of days where it's like maybe just kind of heavy meals. Um,
mm,
and I'll take a look. I'll be like, okay, um, I need, if I'm an equation, I need to balance it in some way.
mm,
Um,
mm,
or, from years of being in education, where, especially in the beginning, my salary was quite low.
mhm,
I think I might have developed some scarcity around money that isn't so much the case now, but I dragged some of that, into this reality. And I have to sit down and say, you know, is this really an issue, or is this bill really a problem? It's like I'll just go back. Again, it'll throw me off center. So a
mm,
lot of times just realizing it's like,
mm.
okay, I have to acknowledge that I'm feeling a bit irritable. Now, what is causing that, and what do I need to do? And that's sometimes where I'll really take a look at the type 3 achiever, because
Mm.
those type 3 achievers are just knocking off the list. They're going down their list,
Yes, they
checking
are.
things off.
Yeah.
Michael, I find if I do that, and I'm like, you know, I'll pick up a tablet or something like this, and I'll be like, okay, what are the 6 things I must do today?
Mm.
And start to do it. It's amazing the positive result that has on how I'm feeling. Because
Awesome.
then I'll look back and I'll be like, wow, I was really stressing out about what I wasn't doing.
Mm.
Or I've told myself, my inner critic will tell myself that something is going to take an hour. And once I actually do it, it takes 10 minutes. But
Yeah.
while I'm telling myself it's going to take an hour, I can't find an hour to do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I'll look back, and sometimes I'll even, next to the task, I'll put like time estimate. And then after I do it, I'll be actual time it took. And usually I'm way, way off the mark. I
Yeah.
think, you know, I want to like type out that perfect email in response to something. And I'll get into this thing of like, I think a little later on, I'll probably be more articulate than I am right now, So
Yeah.
there's all of that.
Yeah.
So, so these, there really, there really are, I've realized a lot of things I can do. First, it's just acknowledging that I'm having anxiety, and then acknowledging that I've got choices. I can either dive into it and allow myself to just stay anxious for a longer period of time, or I can, like I said, go to type 3. Sometimes like just to fool myself to see if it works. If I'm anxious about something and I just say the words, no big deal, it is amazing what that does. That brings me back to center, because my inner critic is saying this is very much a big deal. And I can feel myself go off center. Just saying, hey, no big deal. Or I can handle this. I can handle this. Or sometimes, especially during this whole pandemic, realizing if I'm feeling anxious and I consciously decide to tell myself 3 things that I'm grateful for, I realize it's really hard for anxiety and gratitude to coexist. And usually gratitude wins.
Wow.
And that brings me back to harmony.
Cool.
The trick is to do it.
Yes.
You know, that's the thing. I know, I know that it'll work, but sometimes I just have to wallow a little while before I actually do it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So.
Well, if you were, this is always a hard question for me to answer, but were there, when you look back on, childhood, grade school, high school, early adulthood, were there things that if you knew about the 9 pattern back then that would have been helpful for you, in retrospect, gee, if I, any, or if you were like even coaching a young type 9 teenager, anything that sort of come to mind that helped you or would have helped you that might be interesting for someone to know about?
Yeah, I think especially if somebody might have been able to coach me as a type 9 when I was younger, I think, and I think my mom really did try to do this. I think actually listing out where my strengths and gifts were, because I tended to be a bit overweight and not at all athletic as a kid. And I think for boys, being athletic is a real plus, with membership into the in group, so I was an outlier for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if I could have been more aware, if somebody could have really reinforced with me that it really is a gift to listen, it really is a gift to create safe space. It's a gift. Sensitivity is a gift. Maybe even to be able to say it's okay to express yourself if you're not happy about something, or you're fearful. Don't shut down. Talk it out. Talk it through. Because such a big part of my whole life growing up was coming across that everything was fine, so I guess we could call it almost like faking good, because it wasn't always good. But I was never one of those people. If somebody said, how are you doing? And I would never say, don't ask, or not good, because that would be drawing attention to myself or feeling flawed.
Yeah. Well, we in the 12-step program, we joke about the expression "I'm fine," which means I'm effed up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. So when someone says "I'm fine," said, "Oh, okay, I hear you." And nines can be a master of that. How you doing? I'm fine. It's all good, and I can put that soothing face forward, where inside I might be shaking and baking. But yeah, so those are great recommendations or ideas for how to support a type 9. And so did you at some point start getting inside your body exercise wise and starting to work out? And
Oh, yeah.
tell me a little bit about that, because that's often a big deal for the withdrawn types, 4, 5s, and 9s.
I was probably in ninth or 10th grade. And I had had some shoulder surgery for a dislocation. And back then, like in the 60s, where they keep you in the hospital like for a week or 10 days. And I can remember I was in a lot of pain and I just wasn't hungry. And when I came home, I remember looking at myself in the mirror and I was transformed. It's like I was never obese,
Yeah.
but the thing was I was chunky.
Mm.
And I saw myself and I was like, I don't ever want to be overweight again. And Michael, I never ever was.
Wow.
And the other thing that I think really helped me was I knew I wasn't going to be athletic. I mean, gym class was a nightmare because I remember the gym teacher picking captains and they were always the most athletic boys. And it was me and one other kid on the bleachers praying we would be selected last.
Oh.
When you're trying to disappear anyway, that's horrible.
Oh, that
But
sounds horrible.
also, I was um, I I wasn't really musically gifted, but I was in a couple of musicals where it's almost like I got to put on the cloak of another personality.
Oh.
And that was really helpful to me. It was kind of like an escape from Billy because it was part of the role. And I
Oh.
never had big roles, but yeah, just once I remember I was selected to be Ebenezer Scrooge, and I had to really, really be horrible. And I really got into it. I loved it, and I thought this is just my opposite, you know. It made me realize I bet there's a lot of actors out there that went into acting for similar reasons.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
so
Interesting.
I don't have regrets because I think everything builds, but
Hmm.
um, I would have liked to have shown up maybe a bit more forcefully, a little stronger.
Mhm.
Um, I just worked so hard never to be in trouble. You know, I I remember um, my parents drank and they smoked. And yet, even while they were doing it, they'd say to me, Billy, don't ever start this stuff because you'll never be able to quit it. And Michael, damn it, I didn't get into it. And I
Wow.
thought now that was pretty hypocritical because they were drinking and smoking when they talked to me about that. But I didn't want to be in trouble. I never wanted them to have to confront me,
Yeah.
that I had made poor choices. And it's not that I was totally wonderful, goody goody all the time, but I always worked so hard not to be in trouble. I was not the kind of kid that you'd find in a principal's office. I was a rule follower.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? And
Well, when you were a little guy, or and on up, I've heard a lot of nines will say that they were very. Not only did they not want to get in trouble, but they didn't want to add to the family suffering. That they were very aware of suffering too. so that often they would take care of themselves by going into their imagination and reading lots of books or spending lots of time in nature. Like how did you create a safe space or an inner sanctum for yourself when you were a little guy?
Well, my dad was an alcoholic. So
Hmm.
I realized early, and he wasn't a happy alcoholic. I realized it was very important to stay under the radar screen when he was drinking, because it took very, very little to anger him.
Mm. Mm.
So I would kind of disappear, you know, like I remember, God, when I was 8 or 9, I had a couple of hamsters, and I'd go to my bedroom and I'd just sort of play with the hamsters. And
Mm.
when my dad wasn't around, then I felt like I was really taking good care of my mother, making sure she wasn't upset. Is there anything I can do for you? You know, trying to be like the perfect child.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
but the disappearing, the type 9 disappearing, it probably also created a situation where I wasn't in his direct line. I mean, I learned early on. I would I would I would hear whiskey being poured over ice cubes, even as a little kid, and thinking, "Oh God, it's starting,"
Yeah.
and realizing, okay, I got to go into the right mode. You know,
Mhm.
it's like,
Mhm.
you know,
Mm.
pick that off, not now. It would
Mm.
start off fun. He'd be happy for a little while, and then
Mhm.
get surly. And
Mm. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
it,
So
it
so it's really a survival skill that helped you.
was, it really was.
And then we become adults and we have to undo the survival skill so we can.
Yeah, I'm still trying to undo them.
It's God's sense of
I know,
humor. Well, gosh, we're getting close. Oh, it's 11 o'clock now, so I just want to end for now. Who knows? There might be a part two, but I just so appreciate your reflections and sharing. You know, your journey as a type 9. And was there anything you'd like to say that hasn't been said that that is important for you?
Well, you know, Michael, when you were asking me about my introduction to the type 9, a lot of that was you,
Hmm.
because Lou and I, you know, went someplace, maybe Massachusetts. I remember
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember that.
I didn't, I was just becoming interested in the Enneagram. And I remember like hanging on to your every word, because I thought this is absolutely fascinating. And I
Ah.
want to know as much about it as possible. And then you came to the house and spent a day with the coaches
Hmm.
talking about the Enneagram. And I just thought, you know, this is incredible. And now as a coach, this information for me when I'm working with a client is almost like seeing a lab report.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not trying to pigeonhole
Hmm.
anybody totally into their Enneagram type, but boy, it's sure, when it's accurate, it's amazing. And it can give me an awful lot of insight as to
Hmm.
maybe the best approach to take. So I
Yeah.
really credit you with a lot of my motivation of learning about the Enneagram, because you did it in such a way that I thought, God, this is fascinating.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Well, that's,
So,
I
a really
remember.
nice opportunity just to be able to interview with you today.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, those were powerful days for me too. And I can remember Lou coming up to me and then saying something like, the beds are too small here in this place. And I laughed because they were
Yeah,
small beds. But anyway, Yes, very serendipitous. So look, just sending you lots of appreciation, lots of love, and just gratitude for your willingness to share. And I'll send you the link, uh, and then we'll talk to you soon. So
Well, and I'll just close with this because, my partner Lou is a type 7 enthusiast. So that sometimes his ideas can cause some disharmony. But what we've realized after 37 years, with him being a 7 and me being a 9, he gives me flight and I give him nest. And
beautiful.
that seems to really, really work because he's just out there with possibility thinking, and I got to reel him in. I think sometimes he's got to put a charge under me. Going. So, it's interesting sometimes with different types in a relationship.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, it would be awesome to interview you together and see how those dynamic. That would be. You have to reel him in though, because I know he's out there. Well, thank you for that.
Any given day, he can say things like, "We wake up in the morning." He'll say, "Let's write our obituaries." And I'll be like, "Oh, not before coffee, no."
Well, I would love to hear those stories. So we'll hopefully get a part.
He would do it. Yep.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, you have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Much love.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.